Hey, welcome, Roy. Thanks for meeting me today on this session of Converged Networking for GenAI. Uh, when I meet a lot of customers and partners, the number one conversation that I have with them is around GenAI. In fact, if I don't have a conversation around GenAI, they just don't want to meet with me. They don't want to talk with me, and they lose interest very fast. So, on the topic of GenAI, we started to see some trends where it's not all for the data center. It's all not just AI for the data center. We're seeing AI proliferate outside the data center and be actually deployed in branches and user homes. And so I wanted to get your thoughts in terms of the trends that you're basically seeing in the space.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. Thank you, Kishan, for the opportunity. Gen AI you have to talk about Gen AI, and there's no avoiding it. And the reality is, as well, is that it's not just purely in the data center. With Gen AI, we all heard a lot about pre-training and how many hundreds of thousands of GPUs you could fit into the data center. But as we know with Gen AI, there's multiple elements in the pipeline. There's the pre-training, there's the fine-tuning, and then there's the inferencing. And as we learned from Jensen at NVIDIA, each of these things have different scaling capabilities. And even he says that inferencing is going to be a lot more important than pre-training because a lot of more people are going to do inferencing than pre-training. And inferencing is not necessarily always in the data center. So I think we've seen that. I think the reality is that, out at the edge, on premises, on devices, there's been some elements of AI, right? We use it for surveillance and video surveillance, computer vision. You use it on device today in various ways for your photos editing, for instance. But Gen AI specifically, what we do see is the multimodal interactions when you're talking to ChatGPT or talking to Claude or talking to Gemini, that some of that's going to happen on device and some of that may happen at the edge, just because you're looking for a better response time potentially. And as we get into AR and other use cases with multimodal foundation models, I could see that being pushed out into the edge. And with that, I think the network becomes a lot more important to carry the traffic in a timely manner to get the bits to wherever they need to be, where the models live, and back out to the user devices where they are in fact consumed. So absolutely, we do see the diffusion happening. So Kishan, talking about Gen AI and the network, in your work, you see a lot more than I do around how the network supports these Gen AI workloads and the details and all the details of these workloads and what the network needs to do in order to make them effective and make them usable. What are you seeing trend-wise? What are you seeing there's a challenge for networking today?
That's an excellent question because a lot of people think of the network as an afterthought when it comes to deploying application, right? The focus has always been running, in this case, Gen AI application, but it's very important to understand the characteristics or the nature of these applications. If you take, these AI applications, let's take, for example, a productivity application. A lot of engineers, they use productivity tools to help them, either finish their code or basically look at the authenticity of the code and how well they've written it and how it can be optimized. So what they do is, let's assume that they're sitting in remote locations and they basically upload their code over to this central processing engine. It basically processes it and then it sends a chunk of data down. This is a stark contrast and difference from the way we've traditionally used networks. Prior to AI becoming very popular, we would send a few bytes of traffic up and then a few tens and thousands of bytes of traffic down. Right. So there was a symmetricity to be expected in the network. And that has completely changed with Gen AI applications. Now you're sending, quite a chunk of data up and, same or more amount of data coming down. So that's number one. The symmetricity model has changed. The second is these applications are quite bursty in nature. And like you pointed out, are very latency sensitive. This is one of the reasons they want to run it at the edge. So all of these characteristics are causing, networking teams to rethink how they should be delivering these services with an updated networking capability. And so that's where we basically come in. We're looking at different options of and helping customers and guiding them, knowing what they know about how these applications behave in terms of how they should be basically looking at a converged network for them to basically run these apps. And that's why we built Velo RAIN, which stands for Velo Robust AI Networking. The elements within this architecture allows us to, first of all, recognize AI applications. In the world that we are today, a lot of these applications use advanced technologies such as ECH or TLS 1.3 that makes traditional ways of identifying these applications very difficult. And so we're introducing capability that uses AI ML to actually identify the way these applications behave and map them to a category of AI applications. Knowing these applications allow us to be more intelligent in the way we process and treat these applications. How do I enforce policy across these applications? And these are all in the framework of Velodyne.
That makes sense. I think, what you pointed out is a lot more network intelligence than we're seeing. And absolutely right. With encrypted traffic, TLS, encrypted client hello, there's no way for you to know what's inside. And so with using AI to categorize this kind of flows, you can then treat them accordingly.
Correct. And this, because the world, even though there's more AI applications, there's traditional applications as well, and they're all competing for that same bandwidth. And that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I've seen the demos with Meta when you're asking, or Google, you're asking, you get to send that, and then the data has to be processed relatively quickly, and then the answer rendered, just in almost near real time as well.
Absolutely.
And networks needs to support that.
So right, we've talked about the applications, where they're deployed, the challenges to the network, and so given all of these changes and trends, the other thing that I'm noticing is that enterprises are not always in urban locations. They're also in remote locations. I know certain banks in remote locations that have to be operational for that community, for that town. And so I also see these enterprises going back to CSPs, and they're literally demanding for a ubiquitous connectivity service that they can deploy across their network. They do not want to have bespoke access methods in certain locations and having a completely different network in their urban sites. So what are you seeing when it comes to these enterprises and what they're demanding from these CSPs?
Yeah, what you're saying is absolutely right. I think enterprises recognize that connectivity is now critical to businesses, right? Everything is connected, SaaS, web, right? That's critical part of businesses. And so in terms of connectivity demands, I think there's two elements, and you're absolutely right. They're looking for sort of coverage in rural areas or suburban areas or areas where they haven't had good coverage in the past. They're also looking for more redundancy in the coverage because of the criticality, right? If you're down and no one can get to your Google Drive or your OneDrive or whatever it is, then you're stuck and you can't do business. And so in light of that, we're seeing a lot of the CSPs that we talk to broaden their portfolio for connectivity, sometimes on their own, right? Building both fiber and mobile, and expanding the 5G footprint, but also partnering with some of the non-terrestrial networks, NTNs, the satellite providers. You pick a favorite, providers there. And so we're seeing them come back to the enterprise customers with a portfolio of these connectivity services. Say, you know what, we can give you one, we can give you multiple, right? And generally speaking, enterprises will pick at least two in most locations now. Sometimes from the same carrier, sometimes from different carriers, just to get a redundancy, which is great. But now you have, maybe added complexity of connectivity. Speaking of which, I think one of the challenges, even as we're talking to the CSPs, is they're like, okay, that's pretty cool. They're trying to offer portfolios, but there's been an ongoing monetization challenge, right? And always been that, how do we not just be pure underlay? How do we expand our capabilities in terms of the offerings for the enterprises? So actually, speaking of that, I know that, the VeloCloud team works with a lot of CSPs worldwide. You have a huge footprint. What are you doing to help them with their monetization? Is GenAI one of these elements that they could go back and say, hey, look, here's another driver to help them monetize their networks?
Yeah, so that's a pretty great question. When it comes to, a bit of background in terms of what CSPs have done, they've laid out a lot of 5G towers. They grew their investment and their deployment of 5G quite significantly over the years, looking to attract a lot more mobile, traffic.
Mm-hmm.
But they have all this investment in place. The subscriber rate, growth is not growing as much as they might have expected.
Mm-hmm.
And so they looked at the investment that they had in place and started offering 5G network access service, whether it's to enterprises, whether it's for end users at their homes. But then they also start to stagnate in terms of monetization, like the way you pointed out, because at the end of the day, you have a monthly plan and you don't have the luxury of creating tiered pricing within that one access medium. 5G can be quite unpredictable in terms of available bandwidth. A day like where it is, cloudy, or maybe there's a lot more cell phones attached to a tower, it can change the amount of available bandwidth that a user basically gets. So you can't really go and create a tiered pricing based on bandwidth, and you can't slice that further. So this has been one of the challenges, and that a lot of the CSPs face. So this is where we've come in, as part of our product called VeloSky. VeloSky brings in, at least for communication service providers, the ability to monetize on that initial offering that they have for access. We bring in the ability for improving the user experience, because again, on those fluctuating bandwidths, a user experience can vary significantly. And we want to ensure that you get the best user experience out of those 5G links. And the third part, is the more important part, is we bring in the concept of conversions. The ability to use, like you mentioned, 5G networks, your satellite connectivity, or maybe there's a wired line connectivity as well. Being able to use 2 or all of those connections off of a single device and basically be able to spread your load across all of them, basically utilizing all of them, is what we deliver with our conversion strategy as well. Now, specifically going back to how can they monetize? So we also bring in the ability to add security services. And security is going to be very important, and continues to be very important for end users and enterprises. So being able to offer services off of the device, bringing in next generation, firewall capability, and protecting that perimeter, that site, becomes even more critical, and customers are willing to pay for that additional service. So now you have connectivity, and you've got a layer of security, and then you bring in the ability to deliver superior user experience to convergence. We further go down and help CSPs, allowing them to provide this capability to their customers, where the customers can choose which traffic is important, which is business critical, and how they can send that over a specific link. Non-business critical, low priority traffic can be siphoned off to a different link. So being able to use those links intelligently as well is what enterprises are willing to pay for. And these are capabilities that we're offering to CSPs to help them monetize better.
So Kishan, in the analyst ecosystem, there's a lot of debate and arguments, right, about, and not just analysts, but in the enterprise world, the CSP world, there's argument about converged network security, right? Is it best of breed, right? Is it single vendor, right? Is it single vendor or single platform? There's all these different options out there. So, based on what you're seeing in the market, why is it important to have a single vendor solution for a converged platform?
Yeah, and you make a very compelling argument. Depending upon the technology, sometimes a dual vendor strategy makes sense. But when it comes to the context of what we're talking about here, I strongly believe that a single vendor solution for conversions will actually reap a lot of benefits, not just for the end customer, but also for the CSP themselves. A single vendor solution allows the vendor to use all the technology that they have at their disposal to deliver that better user experience, right? In case of VeloCloud, we basically will bond those multiple links that we find at that site and use our ability to basically do sub-second decisions, right? And it's so fast that, let's say that you're either having a voice conversation or you're accessing an AI application, you wouldn't even know that there was faults within the network, because we would have done and taken care of those optimization. And that is only possible when you have a single vendor getting control of all your links and being able to do that. That's one big advantage. And that's from a technology perspective, I would say that was one of the key differentiators. Now, as a technology company, you work with CSPs, you have the ability to go in and create more customization as per a CSP's requirement. Some CSPs might even support the ability to do network slicing. Being able to create a solution that takes advantage of the slices and deliver a more powerful solution to the customer from that CSP's perspective is again something that a vendor, a single vendor can actually offer to them. So it's that relationship with us in VeloCloud and VeloSky is what we basically strive to do. We address the technology needs. We're also looking to bring in that relationship and that customization per CSP. And an extension to that is also how easy it is to work with a vendor. Now, when you have multiple vendors in your portfolio, it becomes equally challenging to go in and understand individual vendors' technology, how you integrate with their backend systems, how can you pull their API. So again, having just a single vendor to interact with makes the ability for you to launch those products a lot more sooner, quicker to the market, and return revenue back to you. So I would say these are the key elements of what we would deliver.
Around GenAI and security, what are you seeing enterprises ask for, and how is it that VeloCloud's able to help them with their security needs, when enterprises and CSPs alike?
Right. I've spoken to end CISOs on this particular topic, and it's very interesting. CISOs actually fear AI applications because just like we talked about the nature of these applications, the fact that we are there's an agentic AI framework and there's a proliferation of AI applications in the network that goes undetected, keeps a lot of CISOs up at night. Right. And this is why it becomes very important to detect early on and report back on what AI applications are running within your networks. That becomes the very first fundamental thing, just knowing, detecting those apps. You can now further take action. Is that unauthorized by the enterprise? Is that something that's not authorized by the enterprise? And if it is not, this is where the security capability that VeloCloud has will come to light. So there's two places. One, you can enforce it right at the edge, at the perimeter, and bring in technologies such as intrusion protection service, as well as intrusion detection services right off of the box. Be able to bring in URL filtering and also bring in IP, malicious IP protection right off the device itself. So these are capabilities that will be the first layer of defense. Depending upon your architecture, for more advanced services, you can send that to our VeloCloud SASE solution as well, where you have a rich set of features, right? You have the malware protection, you've got sandboxing, you've got data loss protection, you've got CASB, you've got the entire suite capabilities that are there sitting for you. Basically, have this traffic inspected and then enforce the appropriate policy. So we have quite a breadth in terms of the security services that we can basically offer to protect, these end enterprise, customers, particularly when it comes to AI applications. Excellent. Now, I would also like to get your thoughts and views on the same topic. What are your thoughts in terms of when it comes to security?
So you're right in that what we're seeing is very, very similar, which is that are you connecting to the services that are sanctioned, right? Some of these services are not compliant with corporate, sort of IP protection. And as a result, they want to make sure that you don't connect to those in the first place. But obviously it's shadow GenAI. So you want to make sure that you're not actually using it, these unsanctioned services. So that's part of it. And then once you're connected to these services, there's a second element, which is, are you sending up data that you shouldn't be, right? So that there are DLP capabilities, looking at it, and you're using the right set of services or DLP, CASB type capabilities. And then finally, the results that are coming out, that one's less critical, I'm hearing, which is toxicity and bias, because there's not much, generally speaking, at network level or even at proxy level that you can do it that really ought to be within the model itself. But on the other hand, there is also a desire to make sure that you're filtering for toxicity and bias, or at least flagging it and saying, hey, wait, this answer may be problematic. So that's some of the elements that we're seeing around sort of GenAI usage, services sanctioned or not, is the data that you're setting up, appropriate data, and then finally, in the output, flagging up potentially content with issues. There is one area that I haven't quite seen yet, which is that if you run agentic AI, and there are actually commands that are issued as a result of that, right? Or operations taken on behalf of the user. And I think then the output becomes a bit more critical, is what actions are you taking? Are those actions, okay, or are those malicious actions? And I think that's an in-process element.
Okay. Right. I mean, I had an amazing time with you, just understanding, your perspective, your insights. So again, thank you so much for this conversation.
Nope, you're very welcome. And thank you again for the discussion around VeloCloud capabilities and VeloRain and VeloSky.
Thank you.